All right, Flavio here. So happy to be with you. We have done a lot of introductory remarks and comments and subscribe to the channel, that kind of housekeeping stuff. But now we're in the thick of the book, and I'm so excited about this. And I think you will be as well as we continue to read and as we continue to see how the magnitude and the importance and the relevance of the story unfolds right before your eyes. This is getting really, really exciting now. So come with me. Let's continue reading the story. Frank Baler is talking to John and Priscilla, and he just went through a description of what he believed is hidden in the story of Abraham in the Bible. So he says, then I added, I needed to test myself on the last one. Now I know for sure. We continue. That is correct, John said. All things on the earth are good, for God creates all things. The moment we become attached to one thing, however, we forget where it comes from. When we realize that we forgot the source, we learn to remember. But before we can live in full grace, we need to test ourselves. You planned on this test yourself long before your birth, and you proved to yourself what is really important to you. This paragraph is extraordinarily loaded. Look, first of all, in religious circles, and if as you get to know me, I'm a pastor. I do not bash religion. I'm just explaining. In religious circles, it is notoriously common for the world to be divided into good and evil. Some things are really bad, some things are good. Here, John says, all things are good, for God creates all things. All things are good, for God creates all things. So if you want to know whether a particular kind of food is good or bad according to the Bible or your religion, I'm not the one telling you what to believe. I'm just saying John says that, all things are good because all things come from God. However, there's a caveat to this. It says, we humans tend to become attached to things. We become belligerent. We become, political about our beliefs. And this is the only way to eat, or this is the only lifestyle that's acceptable. We become very, very militant about our beliefs. And that's what John calls attachment. We become attached. We come to believe that our beliefs are the only way that everyone else should live. And we call that good, and we call everyone else's beliefs bad. And then once we create those labels, we feel entitled to attack them in one way or another, because after all, they're bad people and I'm good. And what a good person does is they attack evil. And this is how people justify wars and so forth. So he says, no, there's no such a thing. All things are good, for all things are created by God. However, the moment we become attached is when we have a problem. And what he says here is a key that it's absolutely fascinating. This is why I love reading this book, and I've read it a few times. He says, when we realize that we became attached to something, anything on the earth, a person, a drug, food, a house, clothing, image, success, money, anything, when we realize that we became attached, we also realize instantly, or the flip side of that attachment is that we forgot the source. We forgot the source. The moment that we realize that we forgot the source, being the creator, the moment that we realize that we forgot the source, we need to learn to remember. Remembering is not easy because by definition, we forgot. It's easy for you to remember what you never forgot. But what you actually forgot is not so easy to remember. If you ever misplaced your car keys, for instance, and you really don't remember where you left them, you forgot where you left them, you probably have struggled, right? Where's my car? Where are my car keys? I can't find them. The other day I was looking for my eyeglasses, and I was going all over the place looking for my eyeglasses, and I knew I had left it somewhere, which is an odd statement, right? Obviously I left them somewhere, but I couldn't find it. I couldn't remember where I left it. So learning to remember is a very difficult thing when we actually forget. By definition, once we become attached to something, we forgot the source. If I'm at the movie theater and all of my attention is focused on the screen where the movie is actually happening, while I'm immersed in the movie, in the images being portrayed in the movie, I'm not focused on the projector behind me, the source of the images. I'm immersed, attached to the image on the screen. Those are different metaphors for you to see if we can communicate these ideas. If I'm really immersed in the movie, it would take some effort for me to stop that immersion and now think of the projector behind me. It's almost irrelevant at that moment because the movie is so interesting and so entertaining and so deep and so enthralling. So when we recognize that we're attached is also when we recognize that we forgot the source. Now we need to learn to remember what the source is. And the process starts with deciding for ourselves, not because we were told, what is most important to us. Because remembering is hard enough if it is the most important thing in your life. But if it isn't, you'll never remember. And this is what Frank is saying. You're going to go through a series of experiences that in some way touch you very deeply so that you yourself are convinced about what's most important to you in your life. That's the only way to remember. And this is what the story of Abraham hides or conceals or reveals if you have somebody to go through these experiences with you. So let's continue in the next lesson. This is getting really, really dense. Now Priscilla is going to talk. But let me just finish this. Priscilla continued seamlessly. Your first superpower, my dear Frank, comes from knowing what really matters to you and from your willingness and readiness to let go of anything else, she said wisely. All mystics who preceded you had to walk away from the love of their lives, whatever that was at the time, for the glory of God. So here Priscilla ratifies what Frank Baler is explaining about the story of Abraham, saying, you're right, there's no two ways about this. The only way for you to know what's important, if you're really focused on the source, you have to let go of the consequence. In other words, all great things on the earth were created by God. But if we become attached to the creation, we forget the creator. It's like if I'm a very wealthy man and I give you gifts. Suppose I give you gifts so that you and I can become friends. So I give you a toy, I give you a book, I give you a car, I give you a house, I give you a bunch of gifts so that you and I can get into a relationship. I'm just giving you good things that I know you would like, hoping that one day you call me so we can become friends. Now you like all those gifts so much that you don't even ask where they're coming from. We cannot be friends. You forget about the donor in this case. Okay, maybe the example is not, but I think you're beginning to understand what I'm saying. We become so attached to the gifts, to the manifestations, to the creations that we forget the creator. And what the creator is saying is, I created you to have a relationship with you. We tend to forget that because we become enthralled with the creation. So then he says, okay, the mystical path can only start, it's a logical necessity, right? If the mystical path is about connecting to with the creator, it has to start with an understanding within you, a visceral understanding of what's most important to you. And the only way to test that for yourself, not for anybody else's benefit, is if you're willing to walk away from the love of your life. If you have that stamina, that willingness. And that, therefore, she says, all mystics before you had to do that in one way or another. A profession, a career, something. Abraham embodied the lesson in the necessity to kill his own son. We're not suggesting anybody kills their children. We're not advocating violence. This is not what the Bible is saying. It's a completely symbolic, Kabbalistic scripture, and it's meant to be looked at in a very, very, very symbolic way. No offense to any person of religious persuasion. I completely respect all religions. I happen to be a pastor in the Christian faith, but I respect other religions as well. But the mystical view on the Bible is that it's a book that hides a much deeper meaning in symbolic fashion. You don't have to subscribe to this view, but that is the mystical view. All right, mega blessings to all of you, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next class.